Ever wondered if success, particularly financial success, isn't just about, grinding harder or catching lucky breaks? What if it actually followed a precise, predictable set of laws? What if getting rich was less art and more, well, science? Today, we're taking a really fascinating deep dive into a truly unique text. Wallace D. Wattles' The Science of Getting Rich, first published way back in 1910. Now, this book, it got a recent boost from Rhonda Byrne, the creator of The Secret, and it makes some incredibly bold claims. So our mission for you today is to unpack its core principles, understand its, maybe surprising, definitions of wealth, and explore its very specific blueprint for attracting abundance.
Absolutely. We'll dig into its foundational philosophy and its practical applications too, because the text asserts that anyone, and it really means anyone, regardless of background or current situation, can apply these principles. We'll try to lay out the ideas clearly so you can really consider its insights for yourself.
Okay, let's jump right in. Wattles kicks off his book with something that might genuinely shock a lot of us, he says. Whatever may be said in praise of poverty, the fact remains that it is not possible to live a really complete or successful life unless one is rich. Whoa, that's quite an opening. But he's not just talking about piles of cash, is he? How does he redefine being rich?
No, not just cash. It's a really powerful distinction he makes. Wattles argues that for anyone, man or woman, to reach their greatest possible height in talent or soul development, they need many things to use. And money is simply the means to get those things. So for him, being really rich means having all he wants for the living of all the life he's capable of living. The core idea, really, is that poverty isn't just inconvenient. Wattles sees it as a fundamental barrier to expressing your full potential.
Okay, and he breaks down this full expression into three areas, right? Body, mind, and soul.
Exactly. He argues that each needs to be fully expressed for a complete life. And in his view, money is required for that full expression across all three.
Can you give some examples? What does that look like?
Sure. So for the body, it means things like good food, comfortable clothes, warm shelter, freedom from crushing toil, plus rest and recreation, basic needs met, plus some comfort. For the mind, access to books, time for study, travel, observation, intellectual companionship, things that expand your horizons. And then for the soul, he talks about love. And love, he says, finds its most natural and spontaneous expression in giving. Poverty, he suggests, actually hinders love's expression because you lack the means to truly give and serve effectively.
Right, that makes sense in his framework.
Yeah.
So the desire for riches in this context isn't greed. It's really just the desire for a richer, fuller, and more abundant life, which he actually calls praiseworthy.
Praiseworthy, yes. He goes even further. He says, neglecting this science of getting rich means you're actually derelict in your duty to yourself, to God, and humanity.
Wow. That's framing it as an obligation.
A fundamental one, yeah, to fully express your potential.
Okay, that leads us to the really interesting part. He calls it an exact science. An exact science. Like algebra.
Exactly like algebra or arithmetic, he says. He insists there are certain laws which, if you learn them and obey them, will lead to riches with mathematical certainty.
That sounds, well, it sounds almost too good to be true for many people, I imagine, given how unpredictable wealth often seems.
Right. He directly challenges our common beliefs. He says it's not mainly about your environment. I mean, rich and poor live side by side, right? It's not about talent either. Plenty of talented people stay poor, while others, maybe less obviously talented, get rich. It's not even just saving money or being thrifty, though those might play a part. He concludes it's solely about doing things in a certain way, with a capital C, capital W.
Doing things in a certain way. Okay.
Yeah, the insight there is that wealth, for Wattles, is a direct consequence of following specific principles. It's not about luck or where you start or even your innate gifts.
So this certain way, it's a specific method. What's the foundation? He talks about this formless substance or thinking stuff. What is that?
Okay, yeah. He describes it as the one original formless stuff or substance from which all things are made. He says it permeates, penetrates, and fills all the spaces in the universe. Think of it like an underlying energy field, but crucially, it's intelligent. It's a living substance that is always impelled toward more life. And here's the key. It responds to its thoughts, or rather, our thoughts impressed upon it.
It responds to thoughts.
Yes. So the real insight here isn't just some mystical idea. It's Wattles positing an inherently abundant, responsive universe. This basically removes the mental block of scarcity, which is maybe the core sort of mindset hack he's offering.
Okay, so the first principle then is that Thought is the only power which can produce tangible riches from the formless substance.
Mm.
And he lays out 3 basic propositions about how this works.
He does. Instead of just listing them, maybe the core idea linking them is that Wattles believes thought isn't just something happening in your head, it's a tangible, creative force. Your mental image, if you hold it clearly and with purpose, directly influences this universal thinking stuff and causes it to manifest.
Like a cosmic 3D printer.
Huh. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good analogy. A cosmic 3D printer for your intentions. And he claims this isn't just theory. He says it can be proven by logic and experience. He even asserts that if everyone who follows his instructions gets rich, well, that's positive proof right there.
Okay, so proof by results. Now, to make this science work, he says you have to think in a certain way,
Mm.
which involves thinking truth regardless of appearances, like thinking health when you're sick or riches when you're broke. He calls that the hardest work in the world.
It is hard work, he admits, but he says doing it creates a mastermind. Not necessarily like a super genius, but a mind that's so disciplined and aligned with these principles that it can seemingly overcome fate or circumstances.
And this leads to a really important distinction he makes, doesn't it? About competition.
Yes, absolutely critical. He stresses that this formless substance, this thinking stuff, it desires more life to all. Which means it's not going to take from one person to give to another. It's not a zero-sum game. Therefore, he says, you must get rid of the thought of competition.
Get rid of competition entirely. That's counterintuitive to how a lot of business works.
Totally. The implication is profound. If the universe is truly abundant and responsive, then your gain doesn't have to be someone else's loss. In fact, it shouldn't be.
So you're supposed to become a creator, not a competitor, and get what you want in such a way that when you get it, every other man will have more than he has now.
Exactly. You're adding to the total pie.
He even brings up figures like Rockefeller and Carnegie. He calls them unconscious agents in organizing industry, but says their competitive approach doesn't lead to true or lasting riches. That's quite a statement. What's his actual critique of their method?
Well, his critique is that their whole approach was fundamentally rooted in that competitive mindset, what he calls a godless scramble for power. He argues that kind of thinking ultimately just binds you to, well, fate, speculation, the ups and downs of the market, limited thinking. The true creative path, he says, is shown by people like Golden Rule Jones, who famously said, what I want for myself, I want for everybody.
Ah, okay. So it's about a mindset of universal upliftment, not just personal gain at others' expense.
Precisely. It's a major departure from conventional economic thought, where competition is often seen as the main driver of progress. Wattles is saying, no, creation and adding value for everyone is the path to true sustainable wealth. Expanding the pie, not just fighting over the existing slices.
Okay, now this next part is maybe even more controversial. His views on poverty and charity. He claims that all charity only tends to perpetuate the wretchedness it aims to eradicate.
Whoa.
Wow, that really flies in the face of common decency, doesn't it?
It does sound harsh, absolutely. His justification is that simply handing out aid doesn't address what he believes is the root cause of poverty, which, in his view, is a failure to understand and apply the science of getting rich, a failure to think and act creatively.
So what's the alternative then?
He claims the poor don't primarily need handouts. They need inspiration. They need to be shown the path to create wealth for themselves using this certain way. So the radical insight, if you can call it that, is that Wattles sees individual wealth generation done creatively, not as selfish, but as the most effective form of philanthropy.
By expanding the whole economic pie.
Exactly. Rather than just redistributing the existing, potentially limited slices, it's a fundamental challenge saying that getting rich yourself through his method is actually the best way you can help the poor, by being an example and expanding opportunity.
All right, a very different perspective. Okay, so if this is an exact science, how do you actually do it? What are the practical steps?
Okay, yeah, he lays out very specific instructions. First, step one, you have to form a clear and definite mental picture of what you want, not vague wishes, a clear picture. And you need to hold it continually in your mind, like a sailor keeping their eye on the destination port.
Just daydreaming about it.
Ah, no, it's much more active than passive daydreaming. It requires, and these are his words, unshakable purpose to attain it, and with unwavering faith the thing is already yours?
Already yours, even before you have it.
Yes. He calls this mental ownership. You have to live in the new house mentally, use the things you desire in your imagination as if they were already real, tangible possessions.
So if I want a new car, I should be mentally driving it, feeling the steering wheel.
Precisely. Wattles would say yes, that level of vivid felt experience, that joyful anticipation that strengthens the impression you make on the formless substance.
Okay, vision, purpose, faith, mental ownership. What else?
Gratitude. He stresses the primary and vital importance of gratitude.
Why gratitude specifically?
Well, he explains that gratitude is what unifies the mind of man with the intelligence of substance. It kind of tunes your frequency, makes your thoughts receivable by the formless.
Like a universal translator.
That's a great way to put it. It lets your desires, your mental pictures, be fully understood by the thinking stuff. So they're clear instructions, not just vague wishes. Plus, he says, gratitude keeps you out of that competitive mindset. It helps you maintain faith that there's an unlimited supply for everyone.
He even suggests being grateful for, well, everything. Right. Including things that seem negative, like plutocrats or politicians.
Yes, even them. Because in his view, somehow they are helping to arrange the lines of transmission along which your riches will come to you.
That requires a huge amount of faith in the interconnectedness of things.
It does. It's about aligning yourself harmoniously with the whole system, seeing everything as ultimately working toward more life, toward growth, even if you don't see how immediately.
Okay, what about willpower? Does that play a role?
It does, but in a very specific way. Wobbles is adamant. You apply your will only to yourself. You use your willpower to compel yourself to think correctly, to hold the vision, to maintain faith, and to act in a certain way. You absolutely do not use it to try and coerce other people or things, or even to try and compel God or the substance. That's wrong and, he says, totally useless anyway, because substance is friendly to you. It wants to give you things.
Okay, don't force it externally, use will internally.
God.
And finally, action. It's not just thinking, right?
Right. Action is essential. Thought is the creative power, he says, but personal action must supplement your thought. Things won't just magically appear on your doorstep.
So if you want gold, thinking about it brings it closer.
But someone still has to dig it up, refine it, transport it, right.
Yeah.
And you have to arrange your own affairs so you're in a position to receive it. And the way you do that, he says, is by giving more in use value than he gives you in cash value in every transaction. Basically, over-deliver, add value.
So demonstrate your worth through action.
And specifically, he stresses, you must act now. Don't wait for the perfect circumstances. Act now in your present business or job with the people and things in your current environment. It's about doing all that you can do that day effectively and doing each single act efficiently.
Efficiently meaning?
Meaning you infuse each action, no matter how small, with your full power, your faith, and your purpose. You do today's work perfectly, holding the vision of your future.
Okay, but what if you feel stuck? Like you're definitely in the wrong job or the wrong place. So many people feel that way.
Yeah, he addresses that directly. He says you don't just sit around waiting to get into the right situation. You actually get a change of environment by action in your present one. You start applying the certain way right where you are. He insists you can start getting rich in any business or profession.
Even if you need new skills or talents.
Yes, because he believes desire is a manifestation of power. If you have the desire, you inherently have the power within you to develop what's needed. You attract the resources or learning required by acting now.
And he advises against rushing things.
Very much so. He encourages the advancing man, that's his term, for someone on this path to never hurry, never feel stressed or rushed. Because on the creative plane, where you're operating from, there's no lack of opportunity. There's plenty for everyone. If you feel doubt or confusion, his advice is simple. Wait, pause. Go back to cultivating gratitude. Hold the vision. Clarity and the right opportunities he promises will speedily come.
So the internal state dictates the external timing, in a way.
You could say that. Your alignment attracts the opportunity at the right moment.
He sounds incredibly confident in this system. He says no possible combination of circumstances can defeat someone following these lines.
He's completely certain. He reassures the reader that if you really stick to the principles, the vision, faith, gratitude, action, then any seeming failure isn't really a failure. It's just a redirection. It will actually lead to something even better, as if, his words, a mind which knew more than he knew, prevented you from settling for a lesser good.
Wow. Reframing failure as guidance.
Exactly. He also advises watching your words. Never speak discouragingly about yourself or business conditions. Never admit the possibility of failure. Always view the world and your situation as becoming, as moving toward the positive, even if appearances suggest otherwise.
And he recommends sticking just to his book.
Yes, at least initially. He strongly advises studying only his book until you've really mastered its principles. To avoid getting confused or filled with doubt by conflicting ideas, especially from other philosophical or occult systems, keep the focus clear.
So the ultimate promise is what exactly?
That riches will come, and they will be received in exact proportion to the definiteness of their vision, the fixity of their purpose, the steadiness of their faith, and the depth of their gratitude. It all comes back to those core mental and spiritual disciplines combined with action.
So quite a journey through Wattles' The Science of Getting Rich. It's over a century old, but wow, it offers this deeply philosophical, yet somehow intensely practical path to abundance. It's definitely a system that challenges a lot of conventional ideas about wealth, about competition, maybe even about how reality itself works.
It really does. It outlines this fascinating interplay between your mind, your will, and your actions, all rooted in this core belief in an intelligent, responsive universe that wants you to succeed. And that emphasis on creation over competition and using gratitude as this sort of connecting force, it certainly gives you a unique perspective, not just on money, but maybe on living a complete life, as he puts it.
It absolutely gives you a lot to mull over. So thinking about this deep dive, what really stands out to you listening right now? Do you feel that desire Waddles talks about for a richer, fuller, and more abundant life? And if you do, how might you maybe begin to practice thinking in a certain way? What's one specific, efficient action you could take today, right where you are, to start impressing your unique vision onto that formless substance? Something to think about.